We all talk about networking, but what if their traditional conference environment is actually breaking trust instead of building it?
Today's guest built an ecosystem built on shared stories, small, actionable tasks, and the not so radical idea that genuine community is the only way to tackle your biggest problems.
Plus, the Chief Sustainability Officer role is evolving from a separate function to a strategic balance sheet focused partner. We're discussing why that shift is happening and what the C-suite needs to do to keep everyone rowing the boat in the same direction.
Welcome to the pre-read. Just like the slides you get before a big meeting, the pre-read prepares you, CFOs, and other executives for the next big thing. It's the global podcast where finance, sustainability, audit, and risk teams come together in the C-suite.
If you're making decisions at scale or need to understand the leaders who are, you're in the right place. This is the pre-read, brought to you by Workiva.
I'm Steve Soder, accounting enthusiast and Diet Coke aficionado.
And I'm Melissa Zucker, sustainability nerd and equal opportunist caffeine addict.
Today, we're talking about what actually gets things done in the world of sustainability, risk, and finance.
And today we're joined by Workiva's very own Chief Sustainability Officer, Mandi McReynolds. Welcome, Mandi.
Well, thank you so much. Great to be back in the studio with the two of you. And officially, no one can take away my coffee. So lovely to be with other caffeine individuals.
You're in good company here. And you were in good company, frankly, at Climate Week, which we all had the chance to attend a couple of weeks back. So, Mandi, you had a lot of conversations over the course of the week. What stood out to you the most?
Well, I always say if you go to Climate Week New York, you did the week right if you average about 6 miles a day and walking and crisscrossing the city. And as we walked the city and had different conversations, I think what stood out to me the most was hearing many executives talk about the collide of the chief financial officer with the chief sustainability officer, and now coming in the CIO, and really how these worlds are starting to work together and see themselves working together as we enter into a new low carbon economy or climate conscious economy as we have consumers in the world and looking at both the opportunity, the risk, and the cost.
One of the things that really stood out to me going into Climate Week is, I'll be candid with you, I thought the mood might be a little more subdued. There's been a lot of volatility and a lot of changes, I think, at least looking from the outside in into the world of sustainability. But I was actually really blown away, frankly, by how upbeat everyone was, by the optimism and I think the real progress that's being made. And I think if anything, maybe some of this recent attention has really caused people to have to go back to the core and focus on kind of the things that really drew them and organizations to sustainability in the first place. What about you, Alyssa?
Yeah, I have to agree with both of you in that I think it was very telling that you kind of see what happens in the headlines and then you see what's really happening on the ground when you're actually talking to business leaders. And to Mandi's point, to me, there was just so much dialogue on the integration of climate considerations into core business planning and financial metrics, and really that tight integration of the CFO and the CSO and really framing sustainability, as enterprise risk management. And I think that that's something that certainly isn't new in sustainability, but I do think it's something that used to be maybe the leaders in the field, right? That tight integration of sustainability into financial planning and across the teams. But now I think that so many companies are just frankly experiencing the actual impact of climate change and what that does to their business operation and how that impacts their future planning and resilience. You're really seeing that dialogue occurring at scale as, kind of status quo.
Well, Mandi, speaking of conversations, you had a terrific conversation with Serena Oppenheim, co-founder of Fin-Erth. Share with us, what were some of the highlights?
When I think of the highlights of that discussion, and it was a great example of Climate Week at its best, because we had it kind of off in the corner at the UN office. And if I could peel back the curtain, there were kind of 4 enriching parts of that discussion. The first part was really trust isn't built in the room and is really built not in the virtual room. I think that was something that Serena tried to challenge a little bit more. How do we think about this work from data to our counterparts? And how do we overcome this as leaders as we work to build relationships and experiences that lead and move this transactional work forward? The second piece that I like about Serena is she's really talented at what's called the power of the small ask. Instead of taking these big, huge systematic issues or big, huge business challenges with one big grand plan, how do we focus on unlocking small, manageable asks that actually have an impact and address some of these issues within both business and society? And I think Alyssa said it really, really well. The third takeaway was really the CSO role has moved into being strategy and finance. And there is a growing frustration of leaders who see if this function sits in kind of a siloed operation, that it may not necessarily have the strategic level that it needs, or looking at the CFO managing the balance sheet and ensuring long-term focus. And so I really liked that enriching part of the discussion. And finally, this new alignment is imperative. We have to really integrate it across the entire business, facing the challenges head on, ensuring that all different functions are talking with one another, rowing in the same direction when we think about the opportunity, the risk, and the cost to drive business growth forward. So I look forward to you all getting to hear it. And those were some of the key 4 takeaways from that discussion.
Certainly plenty to dig into there. So with that, let's go to Mandy's conversation with Serena.
Serena, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so fun to be here.
So fun to see you on this side of the pond during New York Climate Week. Typically, we see each other all around the globe.
Yes, I mean, it's sort of, that's the insanity of New York Climate Week, is that you actually get to catch up with people you're seeing at COP, seeing at London Climate Week, or that you're just speaking to virtually. Mm-hmm. So it's really nice to actually see people one-on-one, or actually have catch-up times to really sort of see what's going on.
So Serena, you know my undisclosed secret. And we're going to peel it back and let our audience know.
I'm like, which one?
The one? Which one? Most people, because my job tends to work with external affairs, community relations, stakeholder engagement, and those kind of things, they all think that I love networking events. And I actually have a very hard time at networking events. I'm more introverted. I actually rejuvenate as an introvert. And so the team put on my calendar a few years ago this COP session called Fin-Erth with MSCI, one of our partners. And they said, it's a women's event. I think you're going to like it. And I saw networking and I went, oh no. But then I showed up to Fin-Erth event in COP, and it was unlike any experience I've ever had. And now every year I prioritize meeting with Serena and the Fin-Erth team, whatever event they have, because you believe fundamentally that it is a community, not a conference. And I just love that. And you shared your opening story with over 100 women in the room from all different walks of life about how we could be each other's own resources to redefine and re-support the world and the future that we wanted. And I've never walked away more inspired, more connected, and also real resources in the room. So would you mind peeling back the curtain and taking our audience to that moment of your story and your journey and what sparked this adventure of sustainability, finance, risk professionals all around the globe coming together and being one another's resources?
I can, but I'm feeling slightly overwhelmed. That was so thoughtful, and it's really amazing when you build something from scratch and as organically as me and my co-founder Patrick have, when you get that response 2 years later. So thank you so much. So I'm actually very similar to you. A lot of people think I'm a total extrovert. I have a lot of friends. I know a lot of people, they're like, oh, you're amazing at networking. I hate it. If coming to something like New York Climate Week 2 years ago, I remember going into an event, and I actually went and hid in the bathrooms. Mm-hmm. So I was like, oh God, I've got to go and talk to people I don't know. What am I going to say? And so I was like, okay, you've got to go and talk to 2 people. And, so you go into a networking session, and they're called a networking session, and that's awful for me because it feels very transactional. It's not really about putting humanity first. It's just like, oh, this is what I'm doing. This is what you're doing. And then often the networking sessions at all these events are sort of, they're by a buffet table and you're holding your handbag as a woman, and then you've also got your glass of water or glass of wine or tea. and a plate, and then you're just going up to random people. And that's just way of networking does not work for anyone. And it's not fun and it's not enjoyable. And so I'm an introvert, extrovert like you. As someone said to me today, I'm an ambivert. And Fin-Erth was sort of born as a total accident, partly because of that. So what happened was I used to develop wind farms in the northwest of Scotland. We got consent for a very sizable wind farm back in 2009. We got told that energization was going to be between 2012 to 2014, maybe 2016. And then for the same wind farm, we're currently looking at energization of 2030. So 21 years from consent to energization. So I'd been in an industry which had been incredibly slow, pretty painful, but also really exciting because there were so many opportunities within it. One, it was about clean energy. Two, it was about energy security. And three, it was really bringing jobs to the place that we were looking to develop the wind farm. So I'd fallen in love with that project. And then what happened was a couple of years ago, I got asked to get involved in natural capital. And as we all know, a couple of years ago, natural capital was sort of, what is this thing? And so I got involved, and we were one of the first areas in the UK to go to market where we weren't trying to sell the land, but do a long-term leasehold. And in doing that, it was like the Wild Wild West. Not even the botanists could agree on what we should do with the land. No one could financially structure it. No one could work out legally how to structure it. So what I did, like any sort of weirdo, I guess, is I was like, I know, I'm going to bring together my 9 good girlfriends who work at the intersection of finance and climate and just ask for them for help, and I'm going to have a dinner party. But also they should all meet. And they were in private equity, VC, asset management, data. One was at a family office. So I just brought them all together. And I kind of guess did networking in a way that made sense for me. Which was just put really good friends around a table, share food, break bread together, and let's see what happens. And what was really interesting is I didn't get at all any help on the natural capital project because no one could really help. Everyone was like, no, don't really get it, but let's all help each other here. And at the end, 2 of the women said, when you host the next dinner. And I was like, what next dinner? And that's how the whole thing spiraled out of control to do that dinner that you came to. And what means so much about that dinner is it was such a leap of faith. Firstly, from MSCI, who just sort of believed in us and our vision. But it was a leap of faith in everyone coming to something that was no panels and no keynotes. So it wasn't doing networking in the traditional way. It wasn't doing this conference sort of roundabout, or what I now call the climate carnival, where you appear and there's 4 people or 5 people on a panel, but everyone in the audience is actually on their phones planning on where they're going next. Or they're texting, maybe they're taking notes. But it's just very hard to actually have a conversation and engage, because if you're someone like you, or all these incredible women or men who are working in the intersection of business, finance, and climate, you could all be giving that panel or giving that keynote. What you actually want is to be able to have conversations with people that is going to expand your knowledge, challenge your thinking. And so that's what we try to create with Fin-Erth, is something which is not the standard, but actually what would help us. That's what we try to think at every event. What would help us and what we do, not what is the traditional toe the line, sort of slightly unimaginative route that we see time and time again in New York Climate Week, London Climate Week, every COP. It's very hard to do something different. And it was a real challenge, and it thrills me that you got that emotional reaction from it. So thank you.
And there was also a real business value action for the women that were there, because the way that you formatted is like you share about what is one ask that I have.
Yes.
And then the community sort of sources, what can I do? Who do I know? How can I support you? And to this day, women are emailing one another or texting one another, sharing resources and building kind of the future of finance and sustainability together. Like I said, your motto is community, not conference. But tell us more, because those listening in are chief financial officers, chief sustainability officers, CIO, C-suite executives, C-level executives. And what have you really learned about being intentional with relationships? And what's one thing they could do differently to source and build relationships with one another?
So our big belief is that trust is built in the room, not the virtual room. Trust takes time. And one of the biggest issues and challenges we all face within climate change and working in climate change and sustainability is trust. It's, do you trust the data? Do you trust the people we're working with? You're trying to do things that have sometimes not been done before. So you've got to trust the counterparts. You've got to build ecosystems of many different multi-stakeholders. And so it's all about trust. And so often, especially with the advances of technology, we believe that trust can be done either through AI or through virtual calls. And, we've had a number of virtual calls, but nothing actually beats being in the room. Nothing actually beats having a conversation, but nothing actually beats having a conversation which is not necessarily about work, but it's about building trust. So these first dinners that we did, one of the times that we actually saw women really start to unlock solutions and build trust is when they were unloading the dishwasher or loading the dishwasher and cleaning up after these dinners. Because I did them all at home with Lebanese takeout, because I've got to admit, I can't cook. and it's doing things. It's not sitting around in a very formal structure. And so that's how we formed the Fin-Erth narrative. Because what actually you realize is that humans bond over stories. And so people are more willing to help and support each other and unlock those solutions and unlock those asks. If you're like, well, I started my career here and then I went here and someone's like, wait, I did something similar. Or they were like, and then I lived here and I had this wake up moment. They're like, wait, I had the same. That's where humans bond. So what we've done is design a dinner format where it's like 8 to 12 people around a table. And we ask these 3 questions. What do you do in climate sustainability? How did you get into this? And then the third question is, what are your asks? What are your problems that people around the table could help with? And I think one of the biggest challenges is quite often people go very high. They're like, well, I'm really struggling with this. But actually, we like to think of it a bit like a swarm of bees. Or if you think about, I love analogies, but the Battle of Britain and the rescue of Dunkirk. The big boats couldn't get close to the shore to pick people up. But it was the small boats, fishing boats, family boats, pleasure boats that went over, picked up just 4 or 5 people or 15 people rather than the thousands of people. That is where, if we can build on lots of small asks, we can unlock a lot larger solutions.
I love that. And I often tell people the relationship of trust with whether it's a chief sustainability officer, chief financial officer, CIO, CAO, the CXOs. Oftentimes, there are 2 things I can point to with that group coming together, at least within our own company. One, we talked with my CFO, we've traveled together. So most of our conversations have been in the car to the airport. It's like, as we travel, like getting work done together. And we've come up with a lot of really forward-looking movements together just by having that brainstorm together as we traveled. And the second is we actually have at Workiva dinners with all of our 70-plus vice presidents about a couple times a year.
Love that.
And I sit back and I think back of some of the most enriching conversations with the CIO and others have been at that dinner. And it's because we've, like you said, it's a very different environment. So maybe we're encouraging people to eat more, travel more, have real conversations. Now, the other interesting piece is you learned how to navigate space as an entrepreneur and really building your own table. So I'd love for you to unpack for those listening, how can they build their own table? What does that look like?
So Patrick, my co-founder, and I spend a lot of time talking about this. But it's like, who do you want in your corner? I think is sort of the easiest way to put it. And when I think about my table sometimes can be like 3 or 4 people, and sometimes it's 100. But it's sort of, what are the areas of knowledge that I don't have? What are my skill sets that I don't have? But it's more, what gives me energy? So you get off a call or you have a meeting with someone, and you're like, wow, that person gave me so much energy, or really challenged my thinking. Or maybe realize that actually my thoughts, which were pretty set in one way, are not necessarily what I could be thinking about or I could be challenged. So my whole concept of when I build my table or a table at Fin-Erth is it's not necessarily putting people you would expect around a table. Because often we sit in silos. So if you're in natural capital, you know a lot of the other people in natural capital. And then if you're in food and ag, you know a lot of the other people in food and ag. But actually, how often do we then put those 2 groups together? It's the same land we're talking about. It's the same soil. It's just slightly different purposes. And so when I think about building my table as an entrepreneur, it's finding people who will challenge me. I might often disagree with, but that actually either digs down more into what I'm believe, and it makes me go and get the data and challenge myself more, or it makes me question it. And I think, we're at a time in history where, things are very divided. And, I think if you're building your table, whether you're in a corporate, an entrepreneur, sort of in anything, you've got to think who's around your table. It shouldn't be people who will agree with you. And one of the best talks I ever actually went to was someone in VC who said, if everyone on the investment committee agrees that we should all invest in something, we often then don't do it, because you actually want the dissenters. You want the people who are going to challenge your thoughts. So in building a table, I always try to put one or two people who might challenge what that conversation is going to be around that table.
I'd love to build on that and riff on that, because I agree with you, whether it's your own table or some people say your own board of directors, right? Your personal board of directors for you. I think the other element is sometimes in your role, whether you're new in a CXO role or otherwise, you're sort of stepping into new tables. And you may feel uncomfortable. I remember the first time I sat in on an asset management committee for a global foundation that I was the leader of. And I had never been in a room like that. There was probably 50 words thrown around that I worked out writing down going, what are these words?
We did. Everyone in finance and climate loves acronyms.
Yeah, they all love acronyms. But I was like, what are all these words? And what was so beautiful, and somebody who was at my table at that time, was there was a woman who was a president of one of our major divisions as a company. She invited me up to her office. And she had been an industry spanner like myself, a career spanner, was a previous lawyer, then running like a major finance division. And she said, the reason you're there is to ask the different questions. And she goes, and oh, by the way, just ask them to actually explain it to you like you're 5 and see what they come up with. Like remove the acronyms and see what it comes up with. Because she said, you're going to have a different perspective. So it's not only about, for those listening, building this expansive table, but it's also being okay being invited to a table and knowing that your perspective is different and you can lean into that. And I think that's the beauty when we have these networking events with Fin-Erth is everyone there feels an incredible part of this intimate table, because the difference is what resonates and brings beauty to the resourcing.
88% of global professionals say AI is already driving ROI. But here's the catch. Only 1/3 have the data quality to use it well. In Workiva's latest global practitioner survey, 2,300 finance, audit, and sustainability pros shared how they're building value with AI amid uncertainty, with faster outputs, fewer manual tasks, and more strategic focus. You'll see what's working, where gaps remain, and how data integrity separates the leaders from those lagging behind. Read the full report at workiva.com/PR-building value. That's WORKIVA.com/PR-building value.
If there was one thing I would want people to leave with today is, we've all got to stop surrounding ourselves with people who think and act exactly like ourselves, because we're not going to challenge the status quo. We're not going to move things forward. And it's not going to make us really dig deeper into our own questions and our own data if everyone's just agreeing with us. And actually, the funny thing is, Fin-Erth was born because Patrick and I had this call with this wonderful individual in London, and we were telling him what we wanted to do. And he basically was like, no, this is never going to work. We don't need more conferences. We don't need this. And we sort of left being like, yes, okay, that really challenged us to go away and put onto paper exactly what we were doing that was so different. And so that was actually the most useful call we've ever had, rather than the people who were like, yeah, we love it, that's great. It's really helpful to have the people who are like, no, I don't like it. And then to go away and a bit like a jack in a box, work on it, and then bounce back up.
So I'm curious, because you sit at the epicenter of individuals working across risk, finance, and sustainability from all different walks of life, all around the globe. What do you see as being the number one opportunity for sustainability and finance capital coming together?
There's literally no way for me to answer that.
Okay.
I'm like, it's such a big question.
Yeah.
But what is interesting, and it is such a privilege, is both at these dinners, but also I spend a lot of time with our community. And I sort of struggle with the term community because a lot of people bandy it around. But the reality is so many of these women, like yourself, people have become friends. And that's the thing that I take most pride in, actually. But I don't see one opportunity. But what I see is there are some people who, might be feeling a little down because there's a lot of headwinds. But at the same time, when you see more and more people coming into this space, when you actually see that there are solutions being unlocked, then you do feel energized. And so I don't have one particular answer on that, because I think, this week I've been talking to people over the last couple of weeks on sort of in India, in Kenya, in Nairobi, in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, in London, in Singapore. And so the challenges that people are having are slightly different. And it's very hard to sort of put one overarching theme on it.
Well, I think we're in an interesting time where we look at, if you look at anything in finance, and I always say, look to the past, that's going to give you lessons for the future. It doesn't mean you repeat. And if we look at the past, whether it's tax, data privacy, we have global agreement, but it breaks out differently at the local and the regional level. And sustainability is no different, because it's very much global power with local presence in order to solve the problems for both business and society. And so I think the one piece that I would kind of see across the world as opportunity is, beyond morality, what is materiality? And what is most important to your business? I think what was super interesting with your dinner, and as we started, the epicenter of this idea of building your table, is when you think about that piece, everyone comes to the table with, this is my superpower. This is what I have to give. And so I think the opportunity in front of us with businesses, what's your superpower? What do you have to give? And then go build that table.
Yes. And I would also challenge you, though, as a lot of people are not totally sure what they have to give, because there's so much going on in such a busy space. And there are a lot of opportunities. I find that sometimes when I talk to people, they are not necessarily as clear as to what actually that one superpower they have. And because what we're trying to all work towards is such a systemic issue and it's so complex, you might have that superpower, but how does that then mix in with someone else? And so I think it's,
Yeah, agreed. And I think it's, how do you blend it with somebody else? How do you approach the system together? So we were talking about the evolution of the role of the Chief Sustainability Officer. And what we think is interesting that we're starting to see in the market is you heard several years ago, people would say, oh, I want to work myself out of a job. And the intent of that is good. But the impact and what we're seeing play out looks different, which is where we're seeing some chief sustainability officers become CFOs. We're seeing and have a dual role there. We're seeing some, like myself, focus on customer advocacy because we're customer number one at Workiva when we do beta testing with our tech and product. And then we can be an advocate for chief sustainability officers and CFOs and CIOs and CAOs. You see a few others that are leaning towards revenue. I'm curious, as more CEOs, when they do talk about sustainability and they do talk about their superpower, it's often now linked to revenue. How do you see that changing for the chief sustainability officer as dual roles start to pop up?
Well, I think what's interesting is, because people often talk to me very privately, it's sort of a one-on-one conversation, or when we're at these dinners, they're very much held under Chatham House rules. But, there's been a theme over the last couple of years, and I sort of hearing a bit of a crescendo on it, is often the sustainability function has been sat under one area. So often it's been merged with marketing, or it's been given its own separate area, but without a balance sheet to really manage it. And what I often hear is that a lot of the people are very frustrated because that's not necessarily where they need to be to bring long-term sustainability into it. But then I'm also hearing, which is always quite entertaining, is sometimes in these very large organizations, we'll have different women from different parts of the organizations, but they're not necessarily all rowing the boat in the same direction either, because sustainability can also be then put under many different functions, which is fantastic because it is needed under many different functions. But at the same time, how do we make sure, or how do those companies make sure that everyone is actually talking to each other? And so there's been some very entertaining times where we as outsiders are introducing different people who are working within sustainability. They're like, well, I didn't know this person was doing that, and we did. So I think there's a lot to be done within organizations to make sure the sustainability functions. And if you're doing one aspect or doing another, that they're all actually rowing the boat in the same direction, or at least knowing what the other ones are doing.
And I think that the piece that will be interesting to see is, as we did our global practitioner survey, 90% of investors said that they believe financial performance will come when you have the sustainability data, the non-financial data, meet with the financial data to drive the strategy forward. And so oftentimes people can get overwhelmed with the bigness of it. And I said, but as these areas come together, it's really about how do you take that first step? And the first step is looking at this data together to help drive the strategy and the collaboration forward. So Serena, I just want to thank you so much for your time and an incredible conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you again to our guest, Serena Oppenheim, and thank you to our guest host, Mandi McReynolds. It's fun to be in the studio with you again.
This has been The Pre-Read, brought to you by Workiva, the world's only unified platform for financial reporting, sustainability, audit, and risk.
We've got more insights and hot takes coming your way, so be sure to follow or subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your edge.
If you liked the show, leave it a review. Send it to someone you love, or just shout it out on your next team call.
We'll be back next week, and until then, go lead it like you mean it.
I'm Melissa Zucker, and that's Steve Soder. Our lead producer is Mike Rabano, with additional production support from Renee Lee, Joseph Machinsky, and Drew Hayes. Segment reporting was done by Mandi and McReynolds.
Claire Allison is our graphic designer. Transcripts are created and edited by Courtney Kimsey. And thanks to our digital and social team, Mike Berg, Katie Carr, and Michael Karnowski.